If you don't recognize me, it's because I shaved for the first time in like 2.5 months. So I feel like I look like a little child right now. But I'm a 33-year-old man. You better believe it. But this is the big one. The Minnesota Vikings face off against the Detroit Lions at home. U.S. Bank Stadium, Sunday noon kickoff, which is awesome. Noon kickoffs are the best. And this is a massive game because the difference in this game is going to be huge. The Minnesota Vikings could advance to 2 games up over the rest of the NFC North. They could be 2 games over the Detroit Lions. They would be 6-0. Detroit Lions would be 4-2. Plus, they would hold a tiebreaker if they beat the Lions, which kind of makes it 3 games over the Detroit Lions. Of course, they play them one more time this season. Or the Vikings could fall to 5-1. The Detroit Lions would be 5-1. And the Packers and Bears, I think the Bears have their bye week this week. I'm not sure what the Packers schedule is. So there could be a tied for first in the NFC North after the Vikings started 5-0. Or the Minnesota Vikings could have a 3-game lead over the Detroit Lions and over the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears as well. So the difference in this outcome in terms of standings, in terms of record, is going to be big. All right, let's share some notes for this game to look for. Well, the DraftKings Sportsbook have the Minnesota Vikings as 1.5 favorites. So basically a pickup game. Minnesota Vikings have not been favored for many games this season. They're a 1-point favorite to beat the Giants. They were, I think, was it like a 2 or 3 point favorite to beat the Jets in London. But they weren't a favorite against the Texans, 49ers, Green Bay Packers. But now they're a favorite to beat the Lions by 1.5. So practically a pick-em game. But the Detroit Lions are good. And this is going to be the best opponent the Minnesota Vikings have faced this season. Of course, they don't have Aiden Hutchinson. He broke his leg against the Dallas Cowboys. And that is going to be huge because as it stands right now, Aiden Hutchinson leads the NFL with 7.5 sacks and 17 quarterback hits. So the amount of pressure that is going to be on the Minnesota Vikings offensive line is a lot less because the best player at getting sacks in the NFL right now is out for the season. So a big break for the Minnesota Vikings and a bad break for the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff has been really, really good recently. His first weeks of the season, he wasn't. He completed 52 of 83 passes, a 62% completion percentage with 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions in Detroit's first 2 games. And then, since then, Jared Goff, 54 for 66, 81%, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick, 268 passing yards per game. So this Detroit Lions offense is good. They've got Amonte Brown. They've got Jamison Williams. They've got balance. They've got good running backs, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So this offense that the Vikings are facing against is the most balanced offense the Vikings have seen this season. Because you look at what David Montgomery's done this season. He is tied for 4th in the NFL with 6 rushes of 15-plus yards. And the Detroit Lions have one of the best offensive lines in football. So it is going to be a challenge to get after Jared Goff, to get in those rushing lanes for the Minnesota Vikings, because the Detroit Lions have a sensational offensive line. And Jared Goff gets rid of the ball super quickly. His average time to throw is 2.78 seconds per next-gen stats. And Sam Darnold, just for comparison, it takes him 3.14 seconds to throw the ball. So the Detroit Lions have a tremendous mix of run and pass, and they're unpredictable. Plus, they have the brightest, most coveted offensive coordinator in football. Any job that he wants this offseason that's open could be his. Everyone wants a piece of Ben Johnson. I'm sure teams would fire their coach immediately if that means they would have an opportunity to hire Ben Johnson. So the matchup between Brian Flores and Ben Johnson is going to be a fun one to watch because you got a defensive coordinator that's been the scheme behind one of the top defenses in the NFL. And then you've got an offensive coordinator that just put up 47 points on the Cowboys, doing flea flickers, doing trick plays, doing different things like that. And they just have a very unique offensive skill set with a very unique offensive play caller that will use offensive linemen to catch passes, that will do different things on the football field to confuse defenses. So this is a tough, challenging matchup for the Minnesota Vikings. And it's going to be a big one because the Vikings looks like they're going to be without Blake Cashman. I'd be surprised if TJ Hawkinson plays. Looks like Aaron Jones is going to be on track to play, at least in a limited role. But there's a reason why they brought in Cam Akers. And it's, even though Kevin O'Connell said this wasn't about Aaron Jones, of course it was about Aaron Jones. Or maybe it was about Ty Chandler. But it was a little bit to do with Aaron Jones. You don't want to put the entire load on Aaron Jones when the Vikings play 2 games in 5 days, especially when he's coming off of a hip injury. You don't want to give Ty Chandler all of those carries. You don't want to give Aaron Jones all of those carries. So you bring in another guy, Cam Akers. Take the brunt load off of those guys. So he'll probably play, but Hawkinson's out, Blake Cashman's out, and Cashman has been an instrumental part of why the Minnesota Vikings defense has been so successful this season. So Lions have their best player out on defense, and the Minnesota Vikings have a top player of theirs out on defense. Of course, I think the Aiden Hutchinson injury is going to be more impactful to the Detroit Lions than Blake Cashman is to the Minnesota Vikings just because of the player Aiden Hutchinson is. But Cashman is an instrumental, valuable player to the Minnesota Vikings defense, and he's just been a solidified force back there, and the Minnesota Vikings are going to miss him. As far as predictions go, the Minnesota Vikings, I am going to predict them. I predicted them to beat the Jets. I predicted them to beat the Packers. I predicted them to lose to the Giants, 49ers, and Texans. So what am I? 2-3 in my predictions so far? I'm going to predict the Minnesota Vikings to lose at home versus the Detroit Lions 27-24. I believe that the Giants, what?
Huh?
I believe that the Lions, did I say Giants 27-24?
Huh?
I believe that the Lions, Lions, have a balanced offensive attack. They can run, they can throw, and they have an amazing offensive line. So I believe it's going to be tougher for the Minnesota Vikings to throw the Lions, I almost said Giants, what the heck is wrong with me, off their game.
You kidding me?
And force turnovers, force punts, do all of those things. So Vikings fall to 5-1 after this weekend.